All right, it is 10 o'clock, so I would like to welcome everyone to a virtual coffee club, WGM Behind the Scenes Exhibits with Diane Savage. I would like to start with a land acknowledgement. I am a fourth generation European settler with distant Métis ancestry, and I'm humbled by the opportunity to live, work, and grow as a person on Treaty 4 territory, the homeland of the Métis. My name is Alexis, and as the Programs and Volunteer Coordinator at the Western Development Museum in Moose Jaw, I would like to recognize the diversity of Indigenous people and continue to rebuild our relationship through reconciliation initiatives. Diane Savage has a BFA and MFA trained in fine and applied arts at the Emily Carr University of Art and Design and the University of Saskatchewan. She spent many years in film and television industry and amassed a long list of credits, including an art director for the award-winning APTN series Wapos Bay. Her creative interests span sculpture, mold making, graphic design, set building, and immersive design. Diane brings a love of objects and artifacts to museum work, so I'd like to introduce and pass it over to Diane Savage.
Good morning. Thank you. That was a nice reminder of what I used to do. Thank you. So I found that experience of doing set building and set decorating has really translated very well into working with the WDM, especially in exhibit design, but because we do so much immersive work in the places like stores in the village of North Battleford or Boomtown Street. So today I want to give you an overview of who the Exhibits Department is, where we work, what we do, and I want to go into more detail looking at the process of exhibit development, and I want to give you some examples from our most recent exhibit build. And it was really fun putting that together because I got to go back through that and look at all the work we did on the latest project. And at the end, I'm going to give you a sneak peek of what we're working on right now. Next one there, Dave. Alexis did all my introducing for me. So the exhibits department is mainly centered at our corporate office in Saskatoon. We do have staff across the system that work on exhibits. So at the corporate office, we have myself, Director of Exhibits, an exhibits design supervisor, an exhibits design technician, and in our department is the Saskatoon exhibit technician because we're just down the road from them. And then in Moose Jaw, North Battleford, and Yorkton, there are maintenance and exhibit technician staff that do a lot of work on exhibits as well to keep the places running, and lights working, and AV operational, all that kind of thing. So since we are responsible for three main functions in the system, oversight of exhibit maintenance and repairs, which I'm talking about there with our technicians, coordination of traveling exhibits, so things that come in from other institutions, and exhibit development. So that is making new exhibits that are going to go out onto the floor in one of our galleries throughout the system. And that is what the core department spends most of our time doing, so I'm going to talk the most about that today. We work really closely with the curatorial department, specifically the chief curator and curatorial associates. And pretty much every other department throughout the system does support exhibits work. We all do work together, very much a joint effort. Just a quick overview, so in case you're not familiar with the whole system, we do have 4 museum locations across Saskatchewan. In Moose Jaw, we are lucky to have lots of exhibit space. So you can see airplanes, trains, other transportation artifacts from canoes to snowplanes, everything big and small. Snowplanes are my favorite artifacts in the system. I love them. Go see them. In North Battleford, you can experience the outdoor heritage village consisting of over 30 buildings. And of those 30, 16 of them are artifacts, which offers a unique experience because you can actually walk into these artifact buildings. In Yorkton, it's a little bit smaller, but very much action-packed. It tells many people and immigration stories. You can see a settler shack and learn about the experiences of arriving in Canada by many means, rail, airplane, etc. And in Saskatoon, the claim to fame is Boomtown Street, which is an indoor immersive street based on a Saskatchewan town in 1910. And there's a transportation gallery and a large-scale exhibit about the history of Saskatchewan called A Sask Story. So our main topic today is going to be the process of exhibit development, and I will take you through all of these stages with examples. There's many ways that exhibits can be made, and every institution or designer probably does have their own tweaks on the system, but even so, I think they go through much the same steps, whether they call them this or not. So I'll talk mostly about how we work at the WDM. So it's not a universal approach, but if you are interested in developing exhibits, if you work with a museum, there's lots of excellent resources out there. I'd be happy to point you to later by email or to get in touch. So I'm going to go through these 8 main stages, starting with project initiation. So this is not necessarily an exhibit design stage or development stage, but it's important to note because how we choose exhibits is an important part of the process. So you actually have to decide which exhibits are going to get made. And so with the WDM, this process is managed by our curatorial committee. The group is responsible for making strategic decisions about what exhibits projects we're going to take on. So to help us do that, we have our organizational strategic priorities, and we also have the collections development plan to guide us. It was completed by the collections department in 2020 and is aligned to WDM mandate and ends policies, and it responds to our vision of Saskatchewan where everyone belongs and histories matter. So in this document, it lays out 4 main curatorial priorities, which translate to what we collect, what we're using our resources on, and into what we want to exhibit to the public in our exhibit projects. So those 4 priorities are, first, honoring our roots through the legacy collection, truth and reconciliation, diversity and inclusion, and Saskatchewan innovation. And if you want to read more about this, it is available on our website. So while we talk about the process of exhibit development, I'm going to give examples and show images from our most recent exhibit project, Wapahaska Oyate, Living Our Culture, Sharing Our Community at Pioneera, 1955 to 1969. And this exhibit was co-curated by the Whitecap Dakota Nation and the WDM. So in terms of project initiation, this project came about because these photographs, this photograph album resurfaced in the WDM library as people were doing some more cataloging. It included a set of photos that you can see here taken at very early Pioneera events, which is the WDM summer show at the museum. And in the early 50s, it was also the city's summer fair. It was a combined effort, so it was a bit more like the exhibition. Our curator, Elizabeth Scott, made contact with Whitecap Dakota Nation and their historian, Stephanie Daniluk, and with the support of chief and council and elders in the community, they launched a project to identify and name all the people in these photos. Because what you see here is all we had to go on. There's no writing on the back. We don't know who anyone is. There was indications that it was likely Whitecap Nation as well as some other nations. So that's a project for the future to determine who is in some of these other photos that we haven't been able to identify with Whitecap Dakota Nation. So I'll get more into this project as we go, but for now, the way it connects with that project initiation stage is that when the concept to do an exhibit about this project was pitched to the committee, we were able to align it with those strategic priorities and make a decision to move forward. So the first stage out of the way of just actually deciding to make the exhibit, we move on to concept development, which is really exploring the ideas, seeing what we have to work with. To do that, we write an exhibit brief, which is going to be the roadmap for the entire project. Sometimes this is also called a project charter. We figure out if we have space where we want to put an exhibit. In this case, we found about 2,000 square feet in the galleries that we could use. Preliminary budget and a style board, which is going to give us just a basic idea of what the exhibit might look like. So since the Wapa'askaya Yate exhibit was a partnership between Whitecap Dakota Nation and WDM, we also proposed the project to Whitecap Dakota Nation government and community at the same time as curatorial committee. So this initial brief for this project included background on the project, so how it originated. As I mentioned in this case, the naming project with elders and knowledge keepers. Scope, again, that's where and how big. And the big idea. So the big idea is an exhibit term, as often used in exhibits to quickly sum up the main message and themes of an exhibit. So it's sort of the thesis of the project. Now on to read you the big idea for Wapa'askaya Yate. An excerpt of it, at least. From 1955 to the mid-1970s, Whitecap Dakota Nation participated in the Western Development Museum, Pioneer in Saskatoon, a summer showcase of historical agricultural practices. Whitecap members shared their culture and agricultural traditions with visitors, who learn about the history of Whitecap Dakota Nation, how their history was translated into performances at Pioneer, and how the WDM and Whitecap Dakota Nation hope to move forward in time together, preserving and sharing Whitecap's history and the museums. So this brief would also included the exhibit components overview. So that was how much story there is to tell here, what photographs we have to work with, and what artifacts we have. Initial design ideas. So as you can see in this next slide, we can go forward one. This was the first image that was given as an example of what a gallery hung exhibit could look like. So a little bit like an art exhibit in this case, because we had all these photos to work with. And then also it would include project team composition and preliminary timeline, which in this case was completely thrown into the air by COVID, and we had to pick it up again afterwards. So it did extend the term of this project. So once approved by both the WDM committee and Whitecap Dakota Nation government, we held a formal community consultation with Whitecap Dakota Nation. This is in the hotel at Whitecap. Then we wanted to make sure that members of the community had a chance to view what we were presenting and what we were proposing to present, and that the community in general was on board with the project. And it also gave us the opportunity to request formal permission to use photos of ancestors. On to stage 3, which is conceptual design. So this is really just fleshing out what the project could look like. So by this stage, the curatorial team will have the storyline as an outline. So we have a pretty good idea of how much content we're working with. So content, again, means sort of approximate length of the story. I would like to try to get a word count at this point if I can. How many artifacts we have to work with, and an overview of photographic and any other resources. In this case, we didn't have any video resources to work with, so this is entirely photographic. The storyline is written by the curator and is really like the outline of the entire exhibit. And the writing continues to try to get the sign draft complete by the end of this phase. Layout, graphic identity, and color scheme are developed by the exhibit design team, and any interactive or audiovisual planning is done, often in collaboration with curatorial. So here is back to our example of Wapa'askaya Yate. after a presentation of the initial proposal, Chief and Council at Whitecap Dakota Nation were enthusiastic about creating a gallery presentation. So we began working on layout ideas. And at the same time, the curatorial team kept finding more and more photos in the library and other sources, to the point where we realized the space that we had would not accommodate all of the images. So our exhibit designer proposed a concept of a room within a room so that we could have a room to show, a slideshow that would go through all the photos that were collected. So this is the very first model. This is just a little, probably a foot by a foot or a foot and a half by a foot and a half that the exhibit designer, Corey, made to see if this concept could work and to make sure there'd be enough room for people to move around through it with this room inside. And with that floor plan proposed, we then went back to the storyline and pulled out all the themes of the storyline and all the areas of the exhibit to try to overlay. So this is an overlay of it onto the actual floor plan with all of the different themes and areas of the exhibit to make sure that the flow would also work. So make sure that each part of the story would flow into the other and make sense with where it is positioned in space. So what you see is the exhibit furnishings with the story over top. And so furnishing, this will tell you what I mean by that, is the new room inside, the smaller room there, the artifact cases that you can almost make out in there, and exhibit props that standalone signage. So the next one we just jumped to there. The main goal of conceptual design phase is to have a final and detailed layout by the end of this phase. So by now, as you can see, by the end of this stage, we have a pretty solid idea of where everything will go. So this is a SketchUp model based on those earlier models. And we know what each component is. So in this case, we've got that circular room build. We've got 4 standalone signs and the sort of curved walls that are on each side of the room. And then you can also see a few different artifact cases. There's 3 that you can see there. And in the very front is a little model of a horse. So in this case, actually, by the time we got here, this is almost exactly the presentation that we ended up doing. I think the only thing that is markedly different is, I think the curved panels are positioned slightly differently, and the one case at the back wall was not included just because the curatorial team decided not to use that artifact. So as part of this stage, we do a graphics package that collects all of the exhibit ideas. We define the graphic identity by choosing fonts and doing initial color selection. So you can see the proposed color scheme for this project, as well as the font selections. And along with those colors and fonts, we do, in the rest of the graphics package, we do graphic design examples. So on the left, you can see the first example of what that curved wall might look like, the graphics on it. That's a central circular room, sorry. And on the right-hand side, you can see what the proposed standalone signs would look like. And those ones on the right actually ended up looking almost exactly like that in the end. The one on the left got a little modified. So then this graphics package then goes to any stakeholders for consultation. It's just another check-in stage. And once all of that is signed off, we move to design development and stage 4, which is doing all of the nitty-gritty hard work of actually putting the exhibit together. So that would include final graphic design, audio-visual design, and prototyping. So our team for this project did an incredible amount of work on the photos to make them clear enough to use in the large-scale format. Our exhibit design technician, Jane, went through this photo inch by inch to clean it up and improve the quality so that we could get it to this scale. So what you're seeing on the left is the original photo in the album, which was about 2 by 3 inches. And then the final installed photo on the right is 10 feet wide by 8 feet tall. Since this is the first image you see in this exhibit, we wanted to make it really big to bring this scene to life. Even though it's not fully life-size, I think it's big enough that you do start to picture yourself standing in this field. It was important because we didn't have a lot of artifacts to work with, and I find artifacts often are what you do make that physical connection with. And in this case, what we were working with primarily was these photos. We wanted to get them big enough, real enough, clean enough that you could really engage with them on a physical level. So while all that photo editing was being done, we continued working through the storyboard. So this is the next stage after that layout overlay of the themes. So this one is just a printout on the left of that SketchUp model, and with my bad pen drawings over it of how we would lay out all of the different panels and text pieces. On the right, you can see how the analog way that we tried to lay out the storyline to figure out what all the different components were and sort out where everything would go in very, very minute detail. We always try to remember to use technology as a tool and not a rule, so we're free to go whiteboard analog and if we ever need to. So there was also a lot of audiovisual design work. So in this photo, you could see Corey, our exhibit designer, in the middle of the slideshow room testing the projector. So I'm jumping ahead a little bit with this photo because I didn't have any good photos of testing audiovisual equipment. But before this stage, he did put in many hours creating the slideshow and researching equipment, making sure that we had everything we needed for this installation. And the final design stage is where we do any very final detail work. In this case, we did construction documents, pretty rudimentary construction documents I'll show you in a moment, and did graphic design sign off. So that's pretty important. And you need to take your time with getting those signs off because it is just a lot easier to make changes to your graphics now than after the material is printed. Typos definitely do happen, but we try to avoid them. And sometimes updates to the exhibit material happen. We do go back and make changes. So for this project, we did basic construction documents to communicate to the contractor because we had two parts of this exhibit contracted. On the left, the very back wall of that exhibit, of that gallery, which you see in yellow, we had that built because this space didn't have a wall at the back and it sort of had a hallway at the back. We had movable walls that didn't fill the entire space. We wanted to make it a full, complete exhibit space. And on the right is the construction diagram for that central room. And I had to use all of those high school math formulas and remember how to use them to get that one right. With all of that done, we get to move on to fabrication. So that's really all of the design phases are complete at this stage. And fabrication, we're following those plans that we made and hoping that we made the plans that will actually work in the real world. So there's lots of different ways that organizations will do the fabrication stage and different museums will do it differently. Sometimes people will contract the entire phase out from fabrication to installation. And at the WDM, as you saw, we did do some contracting, but we also have a lot of different skill sets within the exhibits department. And so we try to use them as best we can. So we divide up all the work and do a good amount of our fabrication in-house here. So here you can see our contractor, who was Penta Construction, building the back wall and circular room. I think they had fun with the circular room because they had to use all sorts of interesting equipment and supplies that bend. And they ended up doing a perfect circle, and it sounds beautiful inside. While this was going on, the rest of the exhibit staff were still working on finalizing the video slideshow, painting that horse model, refurbishing an architectural model that we were including, and building the showcases. And sign printing. A huge part of this project was printing. And I think we have the time lapse to show you here. So that you see Jane here printing signs. She printed signs for weeks. We are lucky to have a little print shop in-house with a large format printer, so it makes it easy for us to do that work and do all the color corrections and make sure that everything is printing the way we want it. So here you're watching the printer, and it will go all the way here from printing to installation of the vinyl. And at the end, you'll see that final wall, or that entry wall that I was talking to you about right now. So this is that large scale photo at the front. We got very good at installing vinyl. And that's the difference in scale of those artists to them. Which brings us to installation. So as you just saw, we did on-site installation. In this stage, if you're using artifacts, you'd also do any artifact condition recording, make sure all the artifacts are in good condition before they go out, artifact security, and always lots of AV troubleshooting. So as you saw, we installed all that vinyl, but what you haven't seen on this project yet is that the more than 100-foot mural that was painted. You can see here there was a few other things. There's the horse being moved into position, an artifact case, and vinyl. So the next one is a time lapse of that mural. So our design tech here took the lead on designing this mural, and with the help of SkyApp, we contracted to come in to help paint. It was a huge job. It was all hands on deck for part of it, although these two did most of the work, but you'll see me make a cameo in here somewhere. The one thing that we did to make it a bit easier was start with the walls painted a singular gray color so that we weren't painting from top to bottom. You can see some of those color choices from the beginning coming in here. I think this is about 3 weeks of work down into a minute or so.
But
and they're painting over the back door there so that it kind of merges into the gallery space. And finally, I've called this stage evaluation, although it's sort of also the celebratory stage where you get to open your, present your new exhibit to the public. And it's important also to do evaluation to gather information for other projects and anything that you might need to work on in the future on this project. So in this stage, you get to have the public reception and get feedback from stakeholders and do any kind of data collection that you can. So these are some images from the official opening of Wapahaskaya Yate in 2022. There was a program held on Boomtown Street, which you can see on the left, and ribbon cutting in front of the gallery on the right. And these photos were given from Whitecap Dakota Nation for the WDM to use. And you can see on the right, in the ribbon cutting, you've got Mayor Charlie Clark, Councillor Dwayne Eagle, Councillor Frank Royal, Diane Little Crow, and two kids there, Ophelia Deschambeau and Dallas LaFond. Then next to them is Chief Darcy Bear, Minister Laura Ross, and Tribal Chief Mark Arcant. We had a big celebration. It was wonderful to have it open to the public after so many years after being stopped by COVID. And then we have a short time lapse or a short video of what the final exhibit looked like, so you can get a sense of what it ended up looking like if you haven't been to Saskatoon.
Wapaska, Oyate, living our culture, sharing our community.
At Pioneera, 1955 to 1969.
So that concludes the behind the scenes exhibit development process. So the design and installation on Wapahaska Oyate is complete, but it doesn't really mean that the WDM is finished working on the project necessarily. Programming and curatorial will continue to update content and use the exhibit as a communication tool with public visitors and school groups and so on. And it will be certainly a work in progress for several years to come. But since that is done for the exhibits department, it means that we have time to move on to new projects. So I promised a quick sneak peek of what we're working on now, which is this little building in the outdoor village in North Battleford. It is, we often just refer to it as the brick building. It's been sitting on site for many years. It was brought to the museum as an artifact, and it was slated for demolition in the city, so it was accepted as an artifact to avoid demolition. In 2020, the building was moved across the village to a more appropriate spot on the ground, so a new exhibit could be constructed for it. It had to be moved because the place it was sitting was a bit too low and water was starting to threaten the building. We didn't want to build a new exhibit for something we weren't able to preserve. And we also needed to move it in order to preserve it as an artifact. Should we go on to the next one? So I'll give you a little bit of background on what this exhibit is all about. I'm going to read a little bit more in these slides. So currently, the WDM exhibits on immigration focus heavily on rural agricultural immigration, with little mention of urban immigration. These exhibits also focus heavily on Western European and English-speaking immigration. And this brick building project will allow us to put a spotlight on an Eastern European immigration story. This story of Jacob Marjan and his wife is unique but relatable to many people living in Saskatchewan today. His wife's name is Lottie. Jacob Marjan was a cobbler who called himself a shoe repairman, born in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. In Europe, he apprenticed as a child in the trade and showed early skill and abilities. After the First World War, his father encouraged him to seek a better life elsewhere, and he came to Canada. He worked for railway companies until 1929, when he settled in North Battleford and once again took up shoe repair. So that's on the left, the first photo we have of this business, which is a very poor quality photo, but it gives you a sense of the time. And on the right was later in his career in the same building. This is within this brick building, sitting at his workbench. The shop was in operation from 1932 to 1979 in North Battleford. So this bit of his story that you'll see in the exhibit is that in 1933, Jacob returned to Europe to visit his family, and it was the last time he would see his parents, as they were killed in concentration camps in the 40s. And it's not really clear under the exact circumstances that this happened. Further research is needed on this, and that we may never find out what the full story is. The Marjan shoe shop operated from the 30s till 79 and is well remembered in North Battleford. Jacob was a well-loved community member and served thousands of clients, from ordinary people to the RCMP. And it is now, this building is now, although empty, one of these 16 artifact buildings in the WDM collection. So you can see in this next slide that we are working through design stages, and we look forward to presenting this in the fall of 2024. So we are currently we're just nearing final design here. You can see the SketchUp models. This is going to be a little bit of a different exhibit than what we have in North Battleford so far. What we mostly have on the street in North Battleford is it's immersive shop fronts. We go in and it's meant to be the exact feel of what those shops would have been in the 20s. In this case, because it's not positioned solely in the 20s where most of the village is designed to be, this is more of the story of this building. And so it's going to have text panels and be sort of more modern exhibitry. You'll see quite a few artifacts on the left in the shelves, and then there's going to be text panels in between them, a large photo of Jacob at the back, and then a workbench that's going to have some interactive elements on it. There's not a lot of room in here. It's 8 feet by about 20 or 30 feet long, so it's a little bowling alley. We're going to pack it full of information. And that's where we're at with that exhibit. So I hope you can come and see it when it's open in North Battleford.
Yes, happy holidays to everyone. And then our next virtual coffee club is January 25th by Joan Brereton and British Home Children. So I hope to see you all there. Thank you so much and have a good rest of your day.